All right. Welcome to another episode of the Generative AI Meetup Podcast with your hosts. I'm Shashank, and I have Mark joining with me all the way out in Alaska, if you can see his background. We talk about the latest news, developments in AI, the things we learn running our meetup in Silicon Valley. And this week, we wanted to talk about the new GPT-5 announcement, which, we kind of missed it by a day. We had our last podcast episode the night before the GPT-5 announcement dropped, and we kind of wanted to update our listeners on that topic. So I think it is a pretty cool update because it consolidates all of the random models that they had to generate images, to do extended thinking with their reasoning models, and to do one-shot quick responses into one cohesive product. I think they were confusing the heck out of their users with the naming scheme. And this finally makes things a lot simpler and offloads all the thinking that you need to do to figure out, okay, which model do I need to pick for this task? And they handle all of that for you. They do a bunch of routing based on your request, your prompt that you ask the LLM, and then they pick the best model. They pick the best, expert maybe to figure out how to respond. And that might be like a quick one sentence response or a long research paper, depending on, the complexity of the question. I personally like it. I like how fast it is. Even for the reasoning tasks, it performs pretty quickly. And I love that it's available for all free users. And this is a good step in the right direction. What do you think about it, Mark?
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think that GPT-5 is a solid, nice new model, and I think it is fantastic that it's kind of like one model to rule all the models. Because I always thought it was a little bit weird that they had that little model picker in ChatGPT where you had to be like, oh, O3, 4.5. Oh, 4.5 is better for writing. O3 is better for thinking tasks. It's like, oh, we got like our GPT-4o, which is like a good all-arounder, 4.1, like for mini high. It's ridiculous. It's like, I mean, like we're paying like pretty close attention to it, and I think I have like a general sense of when I would use what model for what, but like I don't think that you should have to have a Gen AI meetup podcast to like try to get a handle of all these models because they're like the names made no sense. It was confusing, and all of them were like just slightly different and only different on certain types of tasks. You have to look at some benchmarks, and it makes a lot of sense to combine them all into one. Well, I think it's actually probably separate models under the hood, but they have like my understanding is that you'll ask a question, and then based off the question that you ask, it'll figure out like, hey, how complicated this question, and then it'll route to the appropriate model. So like if I ask a really simple question, like I don't know, how tall is Mount Everest, it might route to a fast model. But if I said like, hey, I can't figure out this race condition in my code, it'll probably route to some sort of thinking slower model, and it'll be anywhere in between. If I want creative writing, it'll route to maybe a writing model. If I want help with math, it might route to something like that, which I think is good because you can just like say, hey, ask ChatGPT and it'll give an answer. However, with that being said, I do think it's great in terms of a UX experience. I don't think that it was a step change like we were hoping for. So to me, it like GPT-5, it seems like a good, nice, solid model, incrementally better than all the other models, but just incrementally. It doesn't feel like it was that like big advanced jump that we were looking for. Like it's to me, like anecdotally, I personally think it's slightly worse than Grok still. I think that it's like around the same level as like Anthropic's model. It's definitely good, right? But like I ran into a couple issues. One is on the UI. I have like some pretty long prompts that I like to ask. So I'll try to put in maybe 20, 30,000 words into the prompt box, and it runs into usage limits. So that is an issue. And also, I felt like it was a little bit terse in its responses. Now, some people may like that. You don't necessarily, not everybody wants like a really long response with everything, but when I used Grok, I was able to put in a really long question, and I was able to get a long response that answered all of the queries that I had with the sufficient detail. So I felt like I personally, for my use case of like programming, I preferred Grok, but other people may choose GPT-5. I think like at this point, it's kind of coming down to preference because like all these frontier models, like I sort of feel like they're almost all like roughly the same. I mean, they're obviously different, but I think at this point, like whether you use like Grok, GPT-5, Anthropic's, Sonnet, uh, or if you want to use like even like Llama or like Google's Gemini, like I think that they're all going to answer like most your queries like okay. Like is GPT-5 better? Maybe on some tasks, but I think it's like really kind of task specific. But I am like happy that they're improving, but like I don't know. To me, it feels like I don't know, with a number change like GPT-5, I was expecting something like a lot better. And I just don't think we got that. So I would say I'm like overall a little bit disappointed with the release.
I hear you, Mark. I think maybe to come to their defense, GPT-5 as a number represents the amount of complexity maybe that went into building this product on the OpenAI team. I think if you look back at all of the models that we had before 4 and what we have now, which is 5, we had 4.1, which was kind of better. We had the 4.0, which was image generation. We had 03, 04, mini, high, which were really good reasoning models. And then we had their deep think features, which I'm not sure if they came out before or after, but either way, we had a lot of features between 4 and 5 that took a lot of effort, and it provided a lot of useful features. And consolidating this into one umbrella, I think was kind of helpful from a marketing standpoint. And I agree with you. I don't think it was like the step change in terms of capability that the customers were hoping for. To kind of address some of the points that you mentioned, you said you like Grok more for programming tasks. I think Grok is actually really good at programming tasks. But they did, like OpenAI partnered with Cursor and a couple other companies to tout its coding ability. So I think it's pretty good, and I think it's very comparable. Like you said, all of these frontier models are kind of converging. They're like a fraction of a percent different from each other in terms of capability, especially when you like level the playing field, because a lot of the benchmarks that we're seeing, they misconstrue and try to obfuscate what baseline that they're comparing things to. Even OpenAI, they got a lot of flack on social media for misrepresenting the graphs. They absolutely made an incorrect graph when they compared GPT-5's performance to like either 4.0 or like 4.5. They were like 4.5 is like 60%, and GPT-5 is like 59%. They showed it over here, 59, higher than 60 over here. It was ridiculous. They fixed it really quickly, but this just goes to show like how maybe like careless or at worst intentionally misleading some of these charts and benchmarks are. So there's so many things that most of these frontier labs compare. The base model with tools, and high compute, which costs an order of magnitude more than just using the regular model. When you talked about how most of these models are kind of converging and kind of similar, yes, but I think the reason why it's even worth discussing the minute differences between all of these in such detail is because it's kind of like the whole world is friends with these 5 personas. The whole entire world has these 5 friends that we talk to for everything, for our personal lives, for our mental health issues, for our social questions, for our work questions, software engineering, research, anything that we have. We use these models as a second brain, and the entire world is using the same model. Same 5 models, let's say. And given the reach and extent to which these models are being used, I think like OpenAI was saying they have something like 800 million weekly active users or something. I'm quoting rough numbers here, but it's on the order of like high hundreds of millions weekly. And that is a lot of people using the same model. So for them to kind of consolidate this, I think is a big win for customers. And like the small differences add up, especially if you're using it for every single query, especially in an enterprise setting. Like you were just talking about how Grok 4 suits your use case better for coding, because if you're writing tens, if not hundreds of thousands of lines of code for a project over the course of several months, all of these small eccentricities add up. I personally think like GPT-5 is good for general use cases. I haven't used it for coding because at Google we have our own internal models, and with Cursor, GPT-5 is like a premium tier model, and for anything. For a hobby, I use the auto feature, which routes to the most effective model for the query that I'm making. So I'm fine with this level of abstraction because the cost is also like non-trivial. If you're using for it, like maybe you can tell us how it's going for your side projects. But to build anything that I want to show to other people, it's going to cost me like a decent chunk of money, a couple $100 of GPT-5 credits. So I'm happy using a lower tier model if I get to use it more.
So I think that's a good point. And I think to go back on what I said, if we just look at GPT-5 as a consolidation of all the models, I guess if I compare GPT-5 to GPT-4, and then if we look at all the other things like 4.1, 4.0, 4.5, all those things, like I guess let's just imagine for a second that none of those intermediate models existed and you just went from GPT-4 to GPT-5, and then they had reasoning capability and then more images and routing and everything like that. Then I would be incredibly impressed if we just compare 4 to 5. But I think that like because I'm comparing it not from 4 to 5, but I'm comparing to like GPT-4 to like GPT 4.5, it's like, well, it's not really that big of a step change. So, sorry, there's a plane going overhead. So I hope that doesn't affect the now we're right by an Air Force base here, and I'm outside. But anyways, so I would say that if we compare 4 to 5, I am quite impressed. And then to answer your other question in terms of the usage, that's actually another reason why I preferred Grok, is because I'm not using the API and I'm just paying for the $30 a month plan.
Mm.
And I found that I'm able to really dial in the exact context that I want to send, because I know that it's possible. I was looking into it. I was trying some of these coding tools like Cursor, and I was trying to get it where I could send the context, the proper context to the model through the API, like via like some of these coding interfaces. And I always found that it would send a little bit too much for my wallet's comfort, I guess you could say. And also I felt like when I sent too much information, it would oftentimes start to hallucinate more. So, as your conversation gets a little bit longer, I think the quality of the code results started getting a little worse. Not just with like GPT-5 or whatever, but with any model. So what my current coding style is, I will make just a standard text file with my question, and then I have like my documentation, which I'll paste in, and then I'll put in the relevant code snippets, and then I'll just paste that into Grok's UI, and then get a response and just like copy and paste everything back, because I actually prefer it that way, because I want it to be a little bit slower, because I find that if I let the AI do too much might break. So like I like to read like every line, and uh typically, especially when it's something that's a little bit more complicated, I like to read every line, internalize it, and then paste it in and make sure like I understand what's going on, because I feel like if I don't do that, then everything just kind of runs off the rail. I just have no idea how my software works. It's like reading somebody else's code, because I mean, I guess I prompted it, but like if I don't understand the output, like what's the point really?
Yeah. I hear you. I actually use Gemini for a lot of long context tasks, because yeah, I noticed a similar thing where at least the consumer-facing ChatGPT portal truncates the responses and doesn't actually let you upload a lot of stuff in that chat box. I haven't tried Grok because I'm paying for so many of these models already, and I feel like it's comparable, and I'm okay waiting for the platforms that I'm locked into to get better. Because it's only a matter of time until the OpenAI drop their big model. It's only a matter of time until Google, Anthropic, Cursor, etc., make improvements themselves. And I'm okay with waiting a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So anyways, I feel like we've kind of beaten the GPT-5 topic to death at this point. I don't really know if there's much else to say other than um, it's a good model, but I think there was a couple other things that we wanted to talk about. Shashank, you mentioned about some of these new guided learning experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is still kind of in the same vein of the GPT-5 announcement. So even though they took out like the plethora of models that you can use, 4.0, 4.1, O3, blah, 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 they introduced a couple different modes. So it's still, one model to rule them all, but there's a bunch of different modes that you can use. I think the ones that we've been used to so far have been like Canvas, which lets you work on a single source of truth document on the side. Another one is Deep Think, which helps you, or Deep Research, I forget the branding. The one where it expends a lot of tokens to think really hard, do a lot of research, go out there, collect documents, come back and give you an answer. This new mode is called Study Mode. So this is really useful because I finished teaching some high school kids an AI summer program over 2 months. And most of them talked about how the primary use case for them as students is to use ChatGPT in their school, ideally to learn new concepts and not cheat on their tests. I will get to this, the cheating part, a little later, but the beneficial use case of ChatGPT in education is to help you learn concepts. And I do this all the time. If there's anything that is foreign to me, a little complicated to understand by myself, I just throw it in ChatGPT. I'm like, hey, explain it like I'm 5. And it does a pretty good job. So the difference between just throwing something into ChatGPT and saying, hey, here's a question, give me an answer, and study mode is that it takes on the persona of a teacher, of an educator, to try to figure out how to best bring out the excitement for that subject from the user and guide them through an experience that helps them learn a concept. So I'm sharing my screen here with the ChatGPT study mode announcement, which came out about 2 weeks ago, I think. It asks you, okay, help me with this problem on my finance homework. And then it's like, okay, step 1, like how do you formulate this this equation? Then it's like the user asks up, okay, can you help me through the calculation? Then it takes you step by step, as opposed to just giving you the final answer. Say, okay, let's take this number, what happens when you plug it into the equation, and so on. So I think it's really cool. I know Gemini is also working on this. I know someone who works on the internal, I forget what they're called. It's some kind of a learning team, because as software engineers, we only focus on coding, which is also a massive use case. I think a third of use cases for these LLMs are coding, but also I think a big chunk is for education. And it may not maybe be as economically important, but there are a lot of students who use this. And I think universities, higher education institutions might benefit a lot by incorporating these into their education curriculum, and rather than trying to fight against AI because they think it might make students cheat on their exams, maybe use these kinds of experiences to help students learn.
Yeah, I love that the fact that this is able to make learning a little bit more interactive.
Mhm.
Have you ever played the Assassin's Creed games?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember in Assassin's Creed, they had like a study mode where
Mm.
you didn't have to fight all of the bad guys, but you could just
Ah.
go run around ancient Egypt and it would tell you
Mm.
things. And they worked with historians
Mm.
and tried to make a historically accurate insert time period here. Like I think they had a ancient Egypt, American Revolution, Greece, and I don't know if it was exactly accurate, but I think there was a lot of like things that they tried to get as accurate as possible in that. And I think that is a fun way for people to learn history interactively. And I think that this could be like a good way for people to learn math or English or another language, whatever. And like I actually was using ChatGPT's voice mode, which I think ChatGPT has the best voice mode. I think it
Mm.
really beats Grok in terms of talking. Um, but it was I used it to help me learn Japanese. So it was like the most patient tutor where I could go ask it a question and it could like say the pronunciation of a sentence slower. Then I
Mm.
could switch to English, ask it follow-up questions. And that was really nice because like I feel like no one person, unless they were an absolute saint, would have the patience for all the questions I had to ask for it. And the AI was like infinitely patient. It was like the perfect tutor. So I'd say the potential is there, and I'd say like a lot of this stuff is like really good. But I think we need to be careful because my understanding is that Duolingo. So
Mm.
Duolingo tried to like lean into the AI piece. And now I don't know what model they were using under the hood. I don't know if they were using ChatGPT. I don't know if they were using something else. But my understanding is that Duolingo. So for those that don't know, Duolingo is uh, a an app, and I believe it's also a website that will teach you a different language. So it shows you flashcards of other languages, so you could use it to learn like Spanish, French, Japanese, Irish, whatever you want. And it's kind of like a gamified learning experience. And they had a fairly large number of staff, and a lot of those that staff was making lessons. So they were professional translators making rock solid lesson content. And then I guess what happened was after Duolingo's CEO decided to go AI first on everything and fired all, almost all of the human translators and cultural experts, it just there was a lot of backlash. So my understanding was that a lot of people on Reddit were complaining. They were rage canceling subscriptions. There's TikTok videos telling everybody to delete the app. There was a Duolingo employee who made a video saying that like they saw a lot of drop in usage. So and I guess like the thing is what happened is a lot of these uh, the AI came out with many uh, grammatically correct sentences, but oftentimes those sentences were oftentimes uh, maybe disrespectful or subtly wrong that were missing some cultural nuances that the AI wouldn't get. So in this Reddit post they're talking about, they said like the example of like tú versus usted in Spanish. I don't really know what that means, but it's just like sometimes there's like oftentimes really subtle things with languages where it may sound correct to a beginner, but it's just like slightly off to the expert. And I think we need to be aware that if you're a beginner and you don't know, if something's subtly wrong, you're not going to catch that. Like if you're the expert, you're not the person who's using Duolingo to use a second language. So like whenever I try to learn Japanese, I'll always ask my wife, like, hey, I like, what is this? Is this correct? And she'll be like, yeah, we're good. Or, oh, that's a little weird. But like I have a native Japanese speaker that I can talk to and ask, right? But like most people don't have that, right? So I think that the potential is there, but I also think that it can be very dangerous because if something's just slightly wrong, like the beginner isn't going to catch it, and then we might be teaching like millions of people at scale a concepts that they just have a little bit wrong, which I don't know. Maybe it's okay. Like you could maybe make the argument to say like, all right, even if we're a little bit wrong, there's all kinds of things that are a little bit wrong in textbooks, and teachers get things a little bit wrong. So maybe that's okay. But at the other hand, it's like, ooh, now you're a little bit wrong times a billion users. So it's like, ooh, now everybody's getting like a slightly incorrect view of their math. Now I think that's going to improve, but it is something I think we need to be careful of. And I would be really hesitant to say like, let's just fire all the teachers, because the teachers spent years and years like actually truly understanding this stuff. And like, I don't know if I want like all AI teachers at this point.
Yeah, I think that is a big faux pas. Tú eres versus ustedes is like you versus the royal you, the formal you, to show respect. I think this reminds me when I started teaching dance at work, and there were maybe like 10, 15 people, and this was salsa, and I was teaching the basics, and someone brought up a concern. They were like, you are a beginner yourself, like you haven't been dancing for that long. What if you teach all the wrong things, and someone goes out there and they're like, hey, I learned salsa dancing from this person at Google, and they're doing like all kinds of flailing around and making an absolute mockery of themselves and the name of our institution. And I was like, I'm not operating at such a scale where this would cause misinformation, and I am giving them this caveat that this is a very beginner lesson, and there's no alternative. But on the other hand, Duolingo is a massive, massive institution. I think they're like the biggest, in some ways, like the biggest educational institution in the world. They have like the biggest customers of any kind of like education platform. I think even more than Coursera. I remember watching a podcast from Luis Mon on about how they're so focused on data, and they know so much about how people are learning that they know just the right amount of push to give a user to not make them feel overwhelmed and dejected when trying to learn a new concept, but yet give them like maybe like 30% of challenging tasks so that they're still being shown something new. But I think on the flip side, I felt like they overcorrected with leveraging AI and trying to scale too early, too quickly. And this is a challenge that a lot of companies are facing. If you go to any of these LLMs directly, I know we keep talking about ChatGPT because it's kind of becoming a verb, but if you go to Gemini, Grok, Claude, and you ask it to teach you a language, I think it's going to do much better than going to Duolingo, because you're using this massive model that has the understanding of the entire world. And I don't think it's going to make these small mistakes that the app that is Duolingo is making, because Duolingo as an app is built by a lot of engineers who are consolidating and distilling information from these large models to curate an experience of learning for a certain level. So I think there's like a lot of layers of abstraction with Duolingo that is kind of missing this bigger knowledge that's contained in these models. But I kind of agree with you as a whole that we need to be careful about how to use these models, which brings me to my next topic, which is a research publication from MIT, which talked about your brain on ChatGPT. And again, I think we're all ubiquitously using ChatGPT as a verb, but they compared 3 different groups. One cohort that was using an LLM, one that was using a search engine, and one that was just relying on their own cognitive ability to work on a bunch of essays. And they surveyed these participants, about 54 of them, over maybe like a couple days or a couple weeks, 3 sessions. And then they monitored their brain activity. They tried to figure out who's using their brain the most and what impact does that have. And just as a caveat, this is not peer reviewed, but the researchers felt so strongly about this that they had to publish this and share it with the world as soon as possible, because the space is moving so fast. Like, as you mentioned, Duolingo fired most of his employees to rely heavily on AI. Like, what impact is this having? Most people are using these tools every single day for every single thing. So on a high level, they found that the people using AI heavily, and I was listening to a podcast from some of the researchers and people who are heads of these educational institutes. They mention the concept of cognitive load. When you use these models, you are kind of going on easy mode with your brain, as opposed to the brain only group, which is who are all thinking really hard to try to come up with novel concepts and string together sentences, paragraphs together in a cohesive narrative. They're using their brain a lot. They not only understand the concept a lot more, they are able to articulate it much better, and they have a lot of attachment to the essays that they wrote. They have a lot more feeling of ownership to all of the content that they produced, as opposed to the LLM group, which is on the far end, using very little brain power that doesn't care about what they wrote. So yeah, I think this is a very delicate area that we should proceed with caution.
Yes, I am definitely mixed on this. So I don't dispute the paper's findings whatsoever, and I definitely find myself thinking less hard about many programs and stuff, because like, I write a lot of software, and I definitely find myself like having a harder time write software from scratch, because it's so easy just to go to ChatGPT and be like, hey, give me a program that does this, and it spits it out. You look it over, like, looks good, and then you just paste it in and go on with your day. And yeah, you don't have to think as hard, but you're also able to write more software. So I don't know. Like, I think it's probably true that you don't have to use your brain as much, because like, we're kind of offloading a lot of these tasks, but at the same time, we're able to accomplish a lot more stuff. And sure, we're not able to retain as much, but like, maybe that's okay. So I feel like this kind of reminds me of Plato's argument for against writing. So, Plato, the philosopher guy, he preferred people just to rely on their memory for things. And when you have the ability to write things down, right, you do not need to exercise your memory. So my understanding is, back in the day, there were people who could hear a long story or a long uh, piece of work, and then just remember the entire thing, and then output it just verbatim. Those are the bards, right? They could tell you stories about the olden times, and they just were a wealth of knowledge. And then when you could write down the stories, you just didn't need to memorize the things, and it kind of became a lost art of conversation and of memory. And if you have writing, you lose that. And it is unfortunate that people have much poorer memories than they did back in the day. But I think nobody nowadays would argue for banning writing because you want to increase memory usage, right? I mean, like if you write it, now you're not relying on some smart person, right? Like if that smart person isn't there, gets hit in the head, dies, whatever, well, now all that information is lost. But if you don't want that information to be lost, you can write it in a book, and then you can put that book in a library, and then somebody 1,000 years later can read that book and understand what those stories were. And I think a similar argument can be said for AI. Like, sure, people are definitely getting stupider because they're using AI to do the thinking for them. But as opposed to having just a book that has static things that you need to write down, we're now creating these mega brain answer engine things that just know all the world's thing and compress them down into like, a few gigabytes, a few hundred gigabytes. And eventually I'm sure that they'll be smaller and you'll be able to run them on your phone. And then soon, like, we'll be able to make it where offline you have the entire world's information available at your fingertips that can answer any question and give you a response back. And yeah, you won't have to think as hard. Uh, but like also with search engines, you don't have to think as hard either. Like I'm sure you'd probably learn a topic better if you had to physically go to a library, find a book, read the entire book to get the answer, and then you probably be an expert on a particular topic. But if I'm just looking to see like, oh, hey, how do I like change the oil in my car? I don't necessarily want to go to auto mechanic school, right? Or like find someone who knows how to do it. I just want to sometimes get the answer how to do the simple task and then move on with my day. So yeah, I don't know. I think that like it's a problem, but like, we also gain a lot. So, with every new technology, you lose something else. I don't know. I guess such is life, and we move on.
Yeah, I think the takeaway for me is we need to strive to do more with these tools as opposed to just try to stay at the same status quo with these tools. And hopefully we can use these LLMs to achieve higher and more complex tasks by working at this higher level of abstraction and not trying to write every word of an essay. We'll be able to I don't know, like come up with it's hard to articulate a future that doesn't exist right now, but
yeah, but let me try to say this another way, right? I think a lot of mental power is wasted on things that don't really matter. So, for example, I know in my mind how I maybe want to write uh, an essay or a piece of code, right? But oftentimes, like, I may not know the exact word or I may not know the syntax in the programming language. So a lot of time is spent doing very basic things that the LLM can abstract that away from you. Like it doesn't really matter if you are going to try to write like an essay, if you know like the bullet points and you want to have the LLM write it for you, I think that's great. You can spend your mental bandwidth thinking about the bullet points and the high level things that you want to do, and then you can have the LLM fill in the details. I kind of think of it almost as if like we're all becoming managers now, where if you are like a people manager, you will think about like maybe the high level tasks that you want done, and then you'll ultimately delegate the task out to the person who's going to complete it, right? Like if I'm the manager of a company, I might have my head of marketing, I might have my sales department, I might have my head of engineering, I might have HR, right? And I might talk to them and I'll say like, hey, sales guy, how's the sales going? Hey, marketing person, like, how are we doing with the ads? Like, hey, CTO, like, how's the tech stack doing? Like, is everything working well? And then, they're going to handle all the little details for me. And I'm just thinking as a CEO of the company, I'm thinking about the overall direction of the company, right? And I think that, like, yeah, like because the CEO is focused on the high level tasks, they're not necessarily worried about the minutia. And I think that because we're getting such capable capable assistants helping us throughout our lives, each of us are learning what it's like to be essentially managers of this model who's helping us to do different tasks. And I think that, like, yeah, it's maybe okay that we're losing some of the detail because we're able to focus on higher level tasks, and then maybe like advance more as a society to solving bigger problems. We don't have to be worried about the minutia. It's like that, like how many people nowadays like know how to start a fire rubbing sticks together? Probably almost nobody. Like I've never like I know conceptually how to do it, but I've never done it. Like I just, if I want to start a fire, I'm using a lighter, right? Like I'm not gonna go and then like find some sticks together and rub them together. It's like, yeah, we lost that, but like we invented a lighter, so who cares?
Yeah, I hear you. On the topic of learning skills and trying to manage people, it seems like the job market has taken a big hit. Um, and I'm sharing for the audio listeners, I'm sharing a graph of the number of tech jobs that are open from startups, unicorns, and public tech companies. And it shows the market peaked maybe in like late 2022 with salaries of like close to $500,000. And in sorry, not salaries. There's a number of open tech jobs, which was like 500,000. And we bottomed out when ChatGPT was announced, I think, roughly around then, late 2023, with about maybe like 150,000. And now it's, it's slowly rising, but not by much. We're at around half of what it used to be at its peak in 2022. And I've anecdotally seen this. As we run a meetup here in Silicon Valley, we see a lot of people looking for jobs, and a lot of people who've experienced layoffs that are still trying to find employment. Maybe some of them are picky. I think it's also partly to do with the fact that they may have had amazing cushy jobs at FANG companies, and now these FANG companies aren't hiring as much, and they're less willing to take smaller entry-level jobs. And this also it is reflected in a New York Times article that has this headline that says, "Goodbye, $165,000 tech job. Student coders seek work at Chipotle." I think it's a case study for a girl who is experiencing this. But they talk about this growing trend where I think on a high level, all of these LLMs have made the tedious, repetitive work and entry-level work automatable. You don't need to hire a dedicated full-time person to take care of these low-hanging fruit tasks. And you can delegate all of these tedious things to an AI and focus, like Mark was saying, on being a manager, manage all of these different tools to do work for you. So that begs the question, like, what happens to these entry-level jobs? You don't really need to hire students anymore. You don't really need to hire fresh grads anymore. You just need senior people who can use these tools to manage them and have these models behave like interns, behave like junior employees, and do work for you. And I think universities are also, realizing this and training students to use these latest AI coding tools and try to upskill them with the knowledge of how to use these tools to solve problems in the real world and become managers as they graduate from universities or higher institutions. Unfortunately, the students who have already graduated and are in like the working pool are at a disadvantage because this space is moving so fast, and they haven't been taught, they haven't been upskilled to learn how to use these tools, and they're struggling.
Yeah, it is a little bit unfortunate for people who are just leaving school right now, because you're right. I think that if you are somebody who has been working for a while and you have experience, you know when the LLM is making a mistake, and you can pretty well prompt these LLMs, and you can use it as a big accelerant, right? And also, because you're able to accelerate your work, there's just a lot less need for junior developers, which is unfortunate because if you do this, if you follow this to the limit, right? Like if all you have is seniors and then you have no one to take their place, either one of two things are going to happen. Either one, just like those people who graduate from college may just not get hired or just be stuck working like manual like retail jobs or something, like, it's not to say those jobs are bad, but like if you go to school for a computer science degree and you're ended up working at Chipotle, that's not ideal, right? The things start to break down really quickly, and that's scary, because we do not want to see that, because eventually those senior developers are going to like either move up, and uh, maybe move to management, retire, replaced, and if you have no junior developers to take their place, well then now we're out of luck. So either I don't know, it's gonna be a weird time. So like companies, if you're listening, still hire junior developers. I think that is like a takeaway that I have, is that like even if your senior developers are like 10 times more efficient, like if you can hire a junior developer, please do so, because like you need to have a pipeline of people who can move up through the organization and become seniors. Because um, if you just dry up all of your junior level talent just relying on the increased output of the senior developers, well, I mean, yeah, that'll work now because like you still have that pipeline, but if we don't hire the juniors, then like we'll never get the seniors who become the experts. So I think that until the AI gets good enough where they can replace the job of the senior developers and even the CEO, which I think will come eventually, but is not here yet, and it's hard to say when that'll happen. Like I think we still need to have those hiring pipelines. So I don't necessarily have like a real big takeaway, but companies, if you're listening, like make sure you continue to hire juniors, even if it's less. Like make sure you still have that pipeline of people that are going to be coming in and are able to work up through the organization, because it's important. You need those people.
And one final topic that I had, not to make this episode all about doom and gloom, but I did want to mention the rise of impersonations, scams, deep fakes, especially financial scams. So there's an article from JP Morgan Chase that highlights the rise of AI scams, especially for like finance. They talk about how 2024 had losses amounting to like over $16 billion, like a 33% increase over the previous years. And I think anecdotally, I've seen this in a couple stories from friends and family. One was someone's grandmother who was in Israel, a Russian Jewish person who was now in Israel, received a phone call from someone reporting to be her daughter, who was saying, this person that we know is in an accident. Like, I need money right now. Please give a bunch of cash to someone who will be at your door in a half hour. And then she did. She gathered a bunch of money, gave this person. And a couple hours later, she gets a call from her actual daughter, who's like, "What the heck happened? Like, I heard you gave a bunch of money to a random stranger who sounded exactly like her daughter, who knew information about this family, and we're able to orchestrate all of this and have someone pick up a package for them from who knows where." So it seems like all of these AI tools are allowing and enabling a more sophisticated level of scams, cybercrime, where they can use AI to create audio, video, and images that appear to be real, that may be trained on the actual voice, image, and information of your loved ones, and give you a call, send you a text, and share some personal information that might be, crawled from the public web, which we've been contributing to ever since Facebook, X, and what have you have come out. So I personally have a lot of information about myself online, and it wouldn't be hard for someone to create a persona of me, especially with this podcast, to create a sound and even a video likeness with my face that can convince someone that AI is actually me. And we've had a couple cases in the news of impersonations of bank employees, government officials, extortion. So this is more of a PSA to all of you. And even if you are a tech-savvy individuals, share this with your loved ones who may not be as savvy as you. Let them know not to trust anything that they hear. And there's like a list of common sense rules that several places have outlined. One is from nyc.gov. I can share a link in the show notes, but it talks about some basics. It's like don't trust what you hear immediately without fact checking. Here, let me do a quick run through. Signs that it's a voice cloning scam. You're contacted out of the blue. You're pressured immediately to act with no time to think. They have a sense of urgency, requesting money through like a wire transfer, gift card payment or crypto that can't be tracked. They're requesting personal information from you. You're told to keep the call a secret. So if you notice any of these signs, just be wary and share this with your loved ones that this is more and more likely. I think, back in the 90s, the Nigerian prince was the OG scam email that people were getting. And now it's getting a lot more sophisticated and personalized.
Yeah, these scams are really scary, and it is not difficult to clone somebody's voice. Like you could use something like 11 Labs. I'm not saying this is how you do it, but like if you want to clone somebody's voice, you could just go to 11 Labs, talk for 20 seconds, and then make a pretty convincing clone. And if you're somebody like us who has a podcast with, I don't know, like 100+ hours of talking online with our face in full view, like it'd be pretty easy for somebody to make a deep fake of us, right? And I remember this actually happened to my grandpa. So this is probably 10 years ago. This is even before AI, but there was somebody who called him and they knew that he was my grandpa. So he was like, oh, Mark's in jail in Canada and he needs $5,000 sent by Western Union to bail him out. So my grandpa didn't ask anybody, but he got $5,000 in cash and he went down to our local drugstore and was like, hey, I'm here to send $5,000 to bail Mark out of Canadian jail. And the people at the store, they're like, hey, did you check to make sure that he's actually in jail? It's like, yeah, I talked to him. It's like, I talked to Mark on the phone and he said he was like really scared in jail. So I just like rushed to the store and tried to get him the money. And he was there to bail me out. And luckily, like, hey, like, why don't you just like double check to his house and like actually make sure that he's, not there. And, I was asleep the whole time. This was, I think, like on a Saturday or something. And I was just, sleeping. I think it was like 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. And I was still in bed. And then my dad comes and he yells up the stairs like, hey, Mark, you in Canadian jail? I was like, what? No. But yeah, these things, these scams have been around for a long time, but they're just getting more and more sophisticated. So I guess like the key takeaway is, if you're ever unsure, so I always have a suspicion if somebody calls me. So if somebody calls me and I don't know exactly who they are, like I have their number set up, and even if I do have their number set up, if my mom called me up and started asking for money, I'd probably be like, all right, hold on, let me hang up and then let me call you back just to make sure it's actually her. So I think that like in general, if you're not sure, hang up and then call that person back. and that's gonna eliminate a large portion. And if somebody ever asks for like 7-Eleven gift cards, Western Union, wire transfer, Bitcoin transfer, just like don't do it unless you really know that this is legit. So I mean, like sometimes it may be legit, right? But I'd say just like always have your guard up. And this may not be for our listeners because I think our listeners are pretty tech savvy, and I don't think you guys would necessarily run into this, but like your family, your friends, your parents, your loved ones who may not be so tech savvy, just like make sure you just like let them know, because this stuff is scary and it's been going on for a long time. People have been lying for a long, long time, and these lies are just getting way more sophisticated. So just keep your guard up and just trust no one that calls you.
With that, I think we are down to our last topic, which is a question from last week's episode, actually, from Rachita, who asked a question related to spec-driven development, which is something that is rising with all of the vibe coding and coding agents that are out there. She said she wanted to try Kiro after writing a few hundred docs. And her question is, would spec-driven development work in niche ML industries lacking public data, which relies today on the creativity of advanced data scientists to build advanced models? And B, how to capture the deltas when code doesn't do what you want to do, but should be reproducible to others. More generally, any thoughts on what spec-driven ideal world looks like to make it accessible to niche areas lacking data while maintaining reproducibility? Mark, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I spent a little bit of time thinking about it, and I think in general, so let me first actually, before I answer the question, let me define spec-driven development. So spec-driven development is where you have a spec or just like a document, like some piece of paper that defines what you want something to do. So let's not talk about software. Let's think about like a blueprint, right? So I sort of think of a spec as kind of like a blueprint. So like if I was going to build a bridge, I might have a blueprint of what I want the bridge to look like, maybe the materials it'd be made with, like where the bridge should be, the dimensions, like the requirements of the number of cars, maybe the number of pedestrians that would go through it, the amount of traffic that it could handle, like the exact starting point, the exact ending point, where I should have the maybe supports built for the bridge, et cetera, et cetera. And then you could have like a similar thing for software, right? Where I could have a, a a spec document where I have the architecture. I maybe have tests that I want, different user stories requirement. I can have just like a really big document that just outlines all the features that I want in the software. And spec-driven development is basically where you either are like, maybe you're maybe a product manager, you're somebody, you are going and you're writing a spec, and then let's not even take AI into this right now, but like I may be a person who writes requirement document for a developer, and then the developer goes and uses that master document to implement whatever software I would want, right? So does that make sense? Like the what is defined for spectrum development? Basically, it's like you make a source of truth document, and then you go and implement the code or the bridge or the house or whatever based off of the original requirements. So you could do this, but as opposed to giving that spec to a developer, you may give that to an AI model. And then the AI model will do its best to implement the spec that you gave it. But in this question, there are some hard parts about it where you may say like, hey, there is some data that is private that we maybe can't put into the spec. And also, maybe when I have the spec, there are errors that either the AI or the developer creates from the original spec. So I think those are two different niches, or like those are some thoughts to put in when you are making the spec. So basically, what I would say is if the spec, if the output of the spec is not what you want. So let's say I make a requirement and in my mind, I'm thinking one thing, but then the software that was written is something else. I would say either one of two things is possible. Either one, the spec is wrong, or two, the code is wrong. So the first thing I would go back and I would say like, hey, look, the spec, especially when you're using it for AI development, should be like a living and breathing document. Like you're never going to get the spec right the first time, right? So oftentimes you're going to write something and then code that is generated may be not what you want. So that what I would do is I would go back and write the spec until I get what I want. So the first thing I would say is like, hey, if the response is not correct, go back and try to write the spec so better. So what I would maybe do is I would give some techniques to make like a better spec would be like I would potentially bake in test cases into the spec itself. So like, hey, like these are particular ways that you could test the code to ensure that it works the way you want. And also like here is maybe some example data. So not to say like you don't want to necessarily give like personally identifiable information in the spec. Like you don't want to give credit cards, but like maybe you would give fake credit card data, fake names, and maybe leverage some synthetic data for your test. So like you could even have it in your spec, like to say like, hey, I want to use some synthetic data library in order to test my code, right? So that's one thing. And also in the question they asked about what do you do for private data, right? Like when it's not public data, but this is maybe like internal company data, something that there's maybe a lot of security around, maybe medical data, whatever. I think that what I would do in that case is I would really try to think in terms of data structure, like the shape of the data when I am generating a response. So for example, maybe you don't say like, hey, here's the credit card data and here's all the social security numbers that I want in my code, but like maybe it's like, hey, I should put a social security number here and here's a regular expression of what a social security number looks like. Or maybe the AI would just know that what a social security number or a credit card number looks like. And I think you could probably build it like that. And if you really need to, you could maybe make some synthetic data as a part of your spec. But in general, to like kind of summarize the way I think is just like the spec should be a living and breathing document that like you're continually updating. So it should be like a virtuous circle where you write your spec, the AI or the developer writes the code, then you look at that and then revise your spec. Now, if you're using a physical software developer, like maybe you're not having the developer write the code, but then maybe you're kind of working with the developer and having them ask you questions. And then it's kind of an iterative process where together you guys would work on a spec. So like I know when I was working at Amazon, like we would oftentimes have a product manager write an initial set of requirements, and then like all the engineers would come together and then say like, hey, like I don't know about this requirement. This requirement doesn't make sense. Like, what about this? And then we would have like many meetings with our product manager kind of refining the requirements until we like all kind of we're all on the same page of what we were going to build. And it was just like an iterative process that sometimes took months to nail down the exact spec that we wanted. And then oftentimes like more things would come up as we wrote the code, be like, oh, there's this scenario which we didn't see, and then we'd have to go back and rewrite and rework the requirements after some negotiation. So I think the same thing is true for AI. It's like you might see the code written for AI and then go back to write the spec. So to answer the question, yes, it's definitely possible to use spec-driven development for making whatever you want, but it's definitely going to require some work. And I don't think you can just one-shot prompt this. It's going to be something that might take some time and some effort. So I hope that answers the question.
I think that was really well put. I don't think I have anything else to add, but definitely to all our listeners, keep the questions coming. Check out our YouTube channel where you can leave a comment, like, subscribe, yada, yada. But thank you for listening. Mark, do you have any other closing remarks?
No, thank you so much for listening. Again, Shashank mentioned, please ask questions. We're happy to answer. And as long as we can, we will try to answer your questions. So we'll definitely put some thought into it. And if you want to see where I'm traveling, I have a YouTube channel for my travels. So yeah, feel free to follow that if you'd like. I'll post that in the description. So yeah, that's it. But I think that's all we had. So we'll catch you in the next one.